Joined by former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. Happy Christmas to you, Frank. How you doing?
I'm good. Merry Christmas. Nice to talk to you guys. What's happening?
Well, just humming along. No real storylines to follow here with the Vancouver Canucks.
We have a Rudolph situation here, Frank. All the other reindeers. And then there's one in the Canucks room.
Although I don't know who's playing the role of Rudolph necessarily.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of a mixed metaphor. That's why
Rudolph.
Yeah.
Is Rudolph wearing 40 or is he wearing 9?
It's
I'm
not
sure.
the group that's bullying Rudolph. It's
the one that guides the sleigh, right? So
right.
Again, who is that guy?
Yeah, who is Rudolph? That's a good poll question for next week.
Who guides the sleigh? 43 guides the sleigh.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Who's Santa? I mean, you could take your pick on who's Santa. I don't think Santa would be a player. I think that would be someone in a managerial position.
Yeah, I think Jim Rutherford's Santa. Yeah.
But 43 is Rudolph. Everyone else is just kind of playing for Prancer and Nix. What are the other ones?
Donner and Blitzen just won't stop bitching, you know? They're like that sometimes.
Yeah. So let's get after it. Were you ever in a hot room where the leadership group ran a hot, loud, emotional room?
No. I was thinking about this. You and I were texting about, have I experienced this? I've never experienced something where two guys that are so, such major influences on the team butt heads like this. And guys will have disagreements on things. Guys will have arguments, but it always just kind of sorts itself out. And it's like, hey, just, boys will be boys, or,
that's right.
We're all playing on the same team, and everything just kind of seems to smooth itself over. There's fights in practice. I've been a part of teams that had fights in practice. I've been a part of teams that guys had FU matches on the bench, but it never seemed like it really festered for a long period of time. And the thing about that is, who gets affected more in those situations? I think the guy that gets affected more in those situations is the guy that's not the bull in a china shop, because the bull in a china shop is always, kind of being loud, and in your face, and you just kind of want to do your thing, and you don't want to deal with it. And so that's the guy that I think gets affected by it most. But I've never played on a team where it felt like there was a lot of tension between two predominant players like that, outside of the odd disagreement here and there, or the odd practice fight, which always just kind of gets resolved and everyone moves on.
As it says in any corporation, it starts at the top, though, right? At the top sets the tone, and in this case, I would say the top is the coach, not management. Just in terms of what that coach tone is like, and Rick Tocchet is a tough nut to crack in that regard. I don't know if I want to call him old school or new school. He's sort of somewhere in between. But some coaches are old school and they like the fire and brimstone fiery guy, and some guys are a little more progressive and cater to the modern athlete. And again, I'm not picking on Elias Pettersson or the NHL. I think every sport is dealing with the fact that the modern athlete is different now than they were 20 years ago, where yelling at the athlete and all that sort of stuff was considered par for the course. It's a different atmosphere everywhere in sports these days, isn't it?
It is. And you know what? I learned something too late, I think, that coaches really appreciate a guy who walks around like he's an alpha male. Coaches love that, because coaches aren't in the room all the time, right? They go in for the meetings. They might pop in here and there, but generally, they're just not around for the day-to-day. They're not at the back of the plane. They're not at the dinners. So they only get to see, the limited kind of viewings outside of whatever is happening on the ice. But as time went on, and this is even, in my post-playing career, talking to people, coaches will admit in a candid conversation, they love a guy who walks a little louder, who has his chest puffed out and is willing to be that alpha male, because that tells them that when push comes to shove and we're on the ice, I know this guy's not going to shy away from anything. And so there would be a reluctancy from a coach to say, hey, I need to rein that in a little bit, because it might not be as harmonious in the room because you don't know, you're not in the room. So you don't know, outside of what maybe the trainers tell you who are around or what players, may tell you or may not tell you. It's hard for them to know. But like coaches who live and die by how many points the teams get and how much their team is going to, kind of scrape by and beg, borrow, and cheat at times, they want to know that there's alpha males, and they're not going to do much to suppress that kind of attitude. And so, where does that leave Rick Tocchet with JT Miller? Because that's a guy who kind of walks around, you would think, like he's an alpha male. Like that is going to be loud and a little in your face. And like I don't think coaches are ever going to be the ones to say like, don't do that, because it may affect what they're doing on the ice.
How much do you think management is looking at how
coaches are alphas themselves? It must be said.
Yeah,
so when
Rick,
they see these alphas in their charge, they see a similarity.
How much do you think management is looking at how Rick Tocchet deals with this? He's in his final normal year of his contract. He's got a team option after this. How much do you think they're looking at this and thinking, how is he going to handle all of it?
I don't think it's as much as we may think. I have a hard time with that, because ultimately, for a coach, yes, there's a certain conduct that the players need to have. It's not really on the coach. Like the coach is not a babysitter. He's not there to, to kind of conduct whatever kind of behavioral, coordinating, whatever you want to talk. Like he's not there for that. He's not there to look after how guys are behaving. If it gets to a point where he has to step in, like that's almost like an indictment on the players that you guys couldn't figure it out to the point that the coach had to come in and act like a babysitter. And I'm sure if that situation ever arose, the coach would do it, but it's a bad look on everyone involved. And if that goes up the ladder, it's just like everyone's going to the principal's office now. And you know what happens when everyone goes to the principal's office? Everyone gets in trouble. It's just like he's responsible for the team winning hockey games, and he's going to try and do whatever he can to help the team win games. When it comes to the behaviors of the players, you would hope that those guys and the leadership group can kind of sort that stuff out. And if he had to step in, I'm sure he would, but that's not his job.
It is, of course, more than just Elias Pettersson, though. JT is loud and emotional with just about everybody. It's pronounced with Pettersson because they both acknowledge, look, we don't see eye to eye, and everybody can see they're just vastly different personalities. Would you be at all concerned about a room that's run hot by an emotional guy like JT? Do you think that adversely affects their ability to win a Stanley Cup or go deep in the playoffs?
It shouldn't, because when push comes to shove and everyone can see an attainable goal, those kinds of things should be on the back burner, and we're just thinking about winning games, and it's for the greater good of the team. Like that, I truly do believe that no matter what, guys will find a way to kind of put that stuff aside, park it, and be together as a group as much as you can, as much that makes you comfortable. Because, like, let's be honest, okay? You guys know a lot of hockey players over the years. You've covered a lot. There have been teams that have won Stanley Cups or have on long playoff runs where guys probably hated each other's guts. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not the last time it's going to happen. And there's still been teams that have had success, but you look back at it and you say, man, those guys hated each other. There were bands. Like, there are bands that made some of the greatest albums and greatest music of all time, and they don't even talk anymore because they hate each other so much. But in those moments, they parked it, and they made some of the best music you'll ever hear in your life. Like, this is not exclusive to hockey, and it's not going to be the first time. It's not going to be the last time. So I think if the history lesson tells us anything, is that when greatness is achievable and attainable, guys can and will find a way to work through it, regardless of what kind of tensions will be around. Where I think it goes south, Matt, is when the play suffers and everyone's struggling, and then it turns into, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and the blame game gets thrown around. That's where I would say, okay, it's hard to get it back there. But if the team is on the right track, then I think everyone can kind of push forward and park some of the stuff, whatever their differences are.
I think of the Amazon series that got released, guys, on the Edmonton Oilers, and that now famous / infamous clip of Connor McDavid screaming at his team in the locker room in the playoffs. Now, granted, that's at a higher moment in the playoffs.
I was just going to say, you fall behind in a Stanley Cup Final series. That's the spot.
But still, the fact that the stoic, stone-faced McDavid is capable of that, even at any point, I don't think people necessarily would have predicted.
Opinion. Right? Like that's not McDavid doesn't get along with so-and-so in difference of opinion. That's just like, that's sheer, raw emotion. That's different for me. But, it's funny you bring up that series. Remember Matthew Tkachuk talking about the Panthers? He made some comments. He's like, we all say the same things. We all speak the same language. We're all, it's nice to have that where everyone, you kind of have the same lingo, the same slang, everyone's got a little bit of personality. There's some wit in the dressing room. Not everyone's going to have that though. But that's part of what makes the Panthers so good because, when they're playing games in December and you're like, the Panthers don't really have it right now. You don't get too worried because in April, all those guys are speaking the same language. They're all on the same page. And when the time is right, you'll see the emotional kind of energy level get there for them because they're all in tune to it, and they're all speaking the same language together.
You're right. Yeah. You don't need that in the room, but it's nice if you do have it, right? Like, if you can get everybody on the same page, it's a little bit nicer.
Okay. Let's say everything that we've just talked about over the last 12 minutes is for naught. If it has to come down to one or the other, who should stay, who should go?
It's Pettersson should stay. I mean, one's 32. One's in his mid to late 20s, right? Like, 26, what's Pettersson, 26? Yeah. And like, if you kind of listen a little bit, like, maybe Miller has something injury-wise that, like, there's just... I'm not going to speculate on it. I'm not reporting that. I listen to podcasts, you know what I mean? And you listen to what people say, and it's like, I know Pettersson had injuries over the years too, but it's the younger guy who... when Miller has been absent at times, has played really, really well. For me, Pettersson has more upside, points-wise, offensive production-wise. Like, we're talking about a 100-point player in the past. So I think the age has a lot to do with it. I think the wear and tear has a lot to do with it. And that should be right there. Like, you'd be hedging your bets saying, I'm going to go with a little longevity here. And I think I've gotten the most or as much as I could get out of Miller, and that's fine. But if push came to shove, and this is, purely a hypothetical, if push came to shove, I think you're keeping 40. That shouldn't be a hot take. Is that?
No, it's not that hot a take. No. Especially with the no move clause, though. That's the only thing that sort of puts up the...
right.
But safe to say that if you are... Like, you're not forcing yourself into that decision anytime in this current season. Would that be safe to say that would be an off-season decision if you have to make it?
If you had, that would be such a first of all, that would be such a travesty if you had to make that decision. Like, I think that would be just the two guys really have let slip away so badly that team now has to suffer because of it. So that would be a travesty because not many teams, like, you try and win Stanley Cups or you try and be a good team for a long time, not many teams are going to be able to throw that at you down the middle of the ice. And so to not have it, whether it's one guy or the other, it just shouldn't happen.
These shitstorms happen. Look at the New York Rangers, right? Like, who'd have thought these soap operas could happen in these
the New York Rangers are so loud. They're so loud about everything they do to the point that I feel like the players look at it and say, like, why do you have to include us in your kind of tomfoolery that you're doing? Like, conduct your business, be cutthroat, no problem. But just leave us and our because it affects your families too when it's public like that. Like, leave us out of it. I don't want to have to go to my wife or girlfriend every day and answer questions about, are we getting traded today, or what's happening with this guy? I heard this. Like, just do it quieter.
Hey, ownership.
Yeah.
And the New York Rangers have an eccentric and emotionally erratic owner. And
a lot of them are.
He sets the tone, and that vibes through the organization, and to the point where Drury's sending a memo to 31 other teams saying everybody's available and that getting leaked and then so on and so on. Just getting back to this Pettersson-Miller thing for a second. I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying, Frank Corrado, that it would be a travesty from the standpoint of a fan or people looking in on the Vancouver Canucks that they would have to break up this 1-2 punch down the middle. Of course, management and the coaching staff would know better than us. They would have a better handle on how sustainable it is right now. And frankly, if they felt like a Stanley Cup opportunity this spring was going to be compromised by this, would they not want to act sooner rather than later? Like I give it, I don't for a second think either of them are going to be traded by the deadline, but I think there's a non-zero chance there. Also, because take a look at your window, gentlemen. It is the next 2 years with Thatcher Demco and Quinn Hughes on the great deals. Mm-hmm. So you probably have to make this decision sooner rather than later, especially with Elias having trade protection coming into his contract in July. So, yeah, I do think you run through the season and see where this is at. And if you come to the conclusion that we're not going to be all that we hope to be because of the conflict between these two players, you make the move in the summer before Elias's trade protection kicks in. And that doesn't mean you move Elias. It just means you do it while you still have the leverage of Elias.
I get it, man. It just I can't believe it would get to that point. Like that would be, one, or it has to be two guys. It has to be two egos that are putting those egos ahead of the team. Like that's, you can't just blame one guy in this situation. Although, like, generally there would be one guy who maybe antagonized the other guy, but we're just not going to know that kind of stuff because we're not in the room, and you're going to go all the way back, and you're just not going to find that stuff out. But for it to get to that point, there would have to be so drastic, and then you'd have to unpeel that for years to really get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. Refresh my memory. I know Thatcher was drafted by the Canucks when you were still playing with them. Did you ever encounter him?
No,
because he was still at Boston College, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been at that point. I wouldn't have been at development camps anymore.
Right.
I think I did 3 laps around the track for development camps and prospect tournaments.
We covered that in September. You were captain prospects camp.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He told us it would take a couple of games, and then sure enough, game number 3 Monday. I mean, he was incredible against the Colorado Avalanche. What do you think of this?
Well,
Demco, Blanken combo going forward here, Frankie.
It's great, but I just think with Demco, like, you wanted to see him be in the net and not have to worry about anything, right? Like, just be instinctual. If you have to make a desperation save, you're not worried about where your leg is going or where your foot is going
That's
or
right.
how you're pushing. You're just doing it. And that's what we saw, and that's great. And it's a testament to how good of a goaltender he is, how talented he is, that it doesn't take him a whole preseason and, a quarter of the season to get up and running. Like, it feels like he's there. It feels like he is up and running. But that's the great thing is that, like, and he even admitted he wants to put his body through it, wants to put his knee through it. Well, you can easily say that he's done that, and now you wait and see how he recovers game to game. But that's what you wanted to see. Just show us the instinctual movement where you're not thinking, and that's what he did. And it's huge for the Canucks. If you want to talk about trying to make a run, Kevin Lankinen's a great story. He's been great during the regular season, and who knows what would have happened if he played in the playoffs. But having Thatcher Demco back, like, gives you a realistic shot against any team you're going up against.
And I think Lankinen's even better as a backup. Like, he needs to play a fair amount, but he is amazing when he's not overworked. And now the Canucks have got the opportunity to get the best out of both of them. So.
Yeah, and in 2025, we'll discuss whether the Vancouver Canucks can win a Stanley Cup with 2-1 results all the way through the
Probably.
Stanley Cup.
Yes.
Playoffs.
And no 2-on-1s in a game.
No 2-on-1s, either for or against. Awesome stuff, Frank. Thank you for this. Happy holidays.
See you, boys. Happy holidays.